G'day fellas. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the first of the two options that the Portuguese have got on land maps, and that is the spice trade. The other option is the advanced trade post, but we're not going to be covering that in this video. We're going to be looking at spice trade and when it's appropriate to be doing it, on what maps you should be doing it, and take a look at the build order that I've done in this game. So let's get to it. Aussie drunk! Aussie drunk! Aussie drunk! Now fellas, just before we do get into the good stuff, I will let you know, I am currently live over on Twitch, so come over, say g'day, and I'll see you over there. Now let's get to it. Alright, so the Portuguese have got a number of different openings, as we've discussed before. They've got the 10-10, the 13-20, the 14-20, and what we're going to be doing on this land map is we're going to be opting for a 13-20. That's going to be our go-to. That's going to enable us to age up a little bit earlier. If we can possibly squeeze it in, we'll even try and go for a 12-20. The idea is that we want to age up not super duper fast, but just fast enough that we're able to gather map control. Map control is the most important thing when you're doing a spice trade strategy, and the reason why is because you're going to need access to hunts. There's no point in you having spice trade sent from your home city collecting hunts 20% faster if you're stuck in your base. You need to be out on the map and you need to be securing map control. That's the whole idea with this strategy. In the early game, you're going to be focusing on collecting food treasures. These are going to enable you to age up just that little bit faster. Depending on the treasures that you start with in your base will depend on whether you go market or not. So if you do have 50 coin or 50 wood starting in your base, then it's best that you go market start. You're going to be prioritizing collecting enough for your hunting dogs and then making sure that you don't idle and making sure that you get that house down. Now, because we've started with a food treasure in this game, we're not going to be starting with that market start, and we'll instead be going for a market during transition where we're going to be getting hunting dogs. With this build order, we're not going to be taking a trading post, and we're going to be spending all of our resources that we get in transition on our market. It means we're going to be getting steel traps, and we're going to combine this with the first card that we send from the home city, which is the economic theory card. This is going to provide a 10% boost to all of your settlers. Now, this might not make a big difference in the beginning of the game, but it will continue to add up over time. The Portuguese do also have access to the Furrier card. However, in my opinion, it's just simply better to go the economic theory card. So typically, if you're going to be starting market, you're going to be looking at doing a 13 or even a 14 villager age up with Portuguese, and that's not a problem. The market start is always going to be a little bit slower than if you've got a food treasure in your base and you're just going all out food. So that's a perfectly normal thing, and part of the reason why I've aged up so fast this time was because I had that in-base food treasure. When I've got that in-base food treasure, I'm also going to be looking for further food treasures on the map. Wood treasures aren't as important to me as a food treasure is, because that food treasure is going to enable me to age up even faster. I really can't stress the importance of finding these additional treasures. It just really helps you snowball that early tempo lead. So despite having a little bit of idle time here, I still think it's reasonable that you skip the villager and you go straight up. You're going to save yourself about 15 seconds by doing that, and that means that you've got 15 seconds extra that you can get your town center into position. Once you reach the transition period, what you're going to be doing is moving all of your settlers over to wood. The idea is that you're going to be putting up a market, you're going to be researching hunting dogs, and you're going to be gathering 125 wood exactly, and then moving over to coin and a combination of food. Ideally though, you're going to be wanting to avoid collecting food until your steel traps comes in and your spice trade comes in. The best way to think about it is that every second your villager is doing something is a villager second. Now, you're not going to be researching placer mines, you just simply don't do it early on the Portuguese, but you're going to be researching steel traps and you're going to be shipping in spice trade. So the only reasonable thing to do in this situation is to avoid gathering food that is not necessary. So what is not necessary food? Any food that isn't contributing towards immediate villager production. Because it's going to take 40 seconds once you age up to ship in that spice trade. It's going to take a further amount of time for you to be researching steel traps. And so what you can do in the meantime is just have your villagers collect coin. You're going to use that coin very, very soon. And by having them collect that coin, you're not losing out on efficiency of villager seconds, because the moment your steel traps and spice trade comes in, you're going to zoom all of your villagers over onto food, and they're going to be gathering at 40% faster. And while it's something that I neglect to do in this game, it's important that you remember, as with all teachers, you do as they say and not as they do. And so aging up with the quartermaster, now there's a couple of options that you can do when you age up, whether you go for a stable or whether you go for a Rax, it's up to you. If you're going to go for a Rax, then I encourage you to build it forward with the town center that you're going to be putting down. If you're going to be going for a stable, then it's absolutely fine to just put it down in your base. It depends on the matchup and the player that you're up against, but typically you're going to be wanting to go a barracks against more aggressive civilizations and a stable against more defensive civilizations. So upon reaching the second age, you're going to be making sure that you send spice trade from your home city, as well as researching steel traps at your market. The next shipment is a little bit more flexible, so if you're starting cav, then it's okay to go 700 coin. If you're starting with musket, then it's probably better that you go 700 wood and you you look to invest in a bit more infrastructure. And the reason why is because you're not going to be able to do a really quick age up to the fortress age with shipping steel traps and making units. It's just not going to be possible, especially if you're trying to make villages out of 2 town centers. You're just not going to have the resources to do it. So it's absolutely okay to go 700 wood and then 700 coin. It's going to be a bit of a delayed age up, but it's normally best to do that. With that 700 wood, what you're going to be doing is putting down a second military production building. So if you went down a stable with the quartermaster wood, then you put down a racks. If you put down a racks, then you put down a stable with the 700 wood. So and then you're just going to be putting down a bunch of houses. So the most important thing that you're going to be doing is ideally avoiding fighting with your opponent. What you want to be doing is distracting them. You want to be keeping them in their base, and you want to be idling their villages. If you can kill villagers, even better. But the whole idea is that you want to get them off your back, and you want to be able to focus to achieve your goals, which is reach the 3rd age, maintain villager production, avoid going idle. So you might be wondering, when is it appropriate to be doing the spice trade build? Well, there's essentially a pyramid, and at the bottom of that pyramid is the spice trade build. You should only be doing it if you can't do what is at the top of the pyramid. So at the very top of the pyramid is the water boom. That's the #1 strategy you want to be going for as the Portuguese. The second strategy is the advanced trading post strategy. And the third final strategy is the spice trade strategy. So when should you be going for a water boom strat? You should be going for a water boom strat on any map that's got at least 4 whales. That's the key. So for maps that have got 3 whales or less, it might be reasonable to just do some sort of like half boom on water and then like half boom on land. That means combining it with something like stagecoach, but normally avoiding going for a spice trade game. Then for the maps that have got no water but have got trade posts, you'd want to be considering ATP, or Advanced Trade Post as it's known, when you have access to at least 3 trade posts. So on some maps you might have access to 2 trade posts only. In those circumstances it wouldn't be reasonable to go ATP. But when there's the 3rd trade post, then it becomes reasonable to do that. And with every subsequent trade post, it just becomes more and more incentivized for you as a Portuguese player to do that. Now on this map, I haven't actually gone with ATP, and the reason why is because when I played this game, ATP was actually bugged. Now it's been fixed on this map since, and I took the opportunity to demonstrate spice trade instead. So there's a couple of different unit compositions that you can do as the Portuguese, but the most common and normally the most effective is dragoons and caçadores. Ideally, you're going to be wanting to add artillery at a later time. It will depend on the matchup that you're up against. As an example, against the Germans, typically you won't want to add artillery because they're going to have a lot of Ulans. Whereas against a civilization like the British, who've got the 2 Falconets shipment, you're going to want to be adding artillery sooner because you're going to need to get those culverin out because they're going to nullify the enemy 2 Falc shipment. The most important thing that you can do with the Portuguese is make sure that you're constantly securing map control, fighting for map control, and continuing producing villages out of 3 town centers at the same time. That is the #1 thing. And the reason why is because you're going to build this slow economic advantage over your opponent. It might start off slow, but it begins to build up. At this point in the game, I'm at almost close to 60 settlers, whereas my opponent might be on a similar number right now, is only on 1 TC, and that means that I'm going to be able to eclipse him very easily once the game continues moving past the 15, 16, 17 minute mark and as into the late game when I eventually hit 99 villages. So the starting card order is always going to be the same. It's going to be economic theory, spice trade, 700 wood, 700 coin. Once you reach the fortress age though, this is where it can vary. Depending on the position that you're in, you might want to send 5 dragoons, you might want to send 8 caçador, or you might want to send 1,000 wood. Typically though, you want to open with a unit shipment if you're under any pressure and 1,000 wood if you've not received any pressure whatsoever. With this 1,000 wood, you're going to be able to get additional market upgrades, put down extra houses, and an extra military production building. Unlike other civilizations, the Portuguese typically want to ship upgrades instead of unit shipments, and because of this, they include a lot of upgrades in their deck. As an example, this is my standard Portuguese deck. When it's on a water map, it gets even crazier with this. But typically because you're going to be having more town centers, you're going to be creating more villages, and as a result, you're going to be making more units than your opponent, who's going to be shipping most of his. When it comes to the big fights, it's going to depend on your composition, but typically you're going to want to be leading with your caçadors and keeping your dragoons very close just in case there's enemy cavalry. In the event that you've got artillery, you want to be leading with your culverin if you know that the enemy has culverin themselves. And you want to be setting them down on the ground and slowly inching them forward. In this situation, I've got a much larger mass than my opponent, and it means that I can just simply overwhelm them. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this walkthrough with the Portuguese spice trade build, and once again I do remind you I am currently live over on Twitch, as long as this video has been uploaded within the last 4 or 5 hours. Now a little bit of an apology to make to my patrons. over on Patreon. So I've got a tier over there that basically says I'll include a thank you message to them in any videos that I do for the next month after they've been a patron. And that's something that I neglected to do with the initial videos for this month, so I do apologize to them. I've somewhat been neglecting my patrons, so definitely going to be aiming to do some more content for them. So once again, apologies. And a big thank you to Nathan Holden, Esty Pesty, and Pink Char. You guys have gone the extra step of providing generous support, so thank you very much for doing that. Alright guys, I'll catch you later, and thanks for watching.